Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really excited today to welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast, all the way from Calgary in Canada, author, blogger, and branding guru Kim Rozdeba, who has guided some of the Fortune 500's oldest and most iconic brands. Welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Kim. It's a real privilege to have you here as my guest.
Thank you very much for inviting me on your show, and it's nice to talk to somebody in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes, we're kind of diametrically opposed in hemispheres. Now, your recent book, Branding Queens, it's a fascinating read. It celebrates the branding accomplishments of a range of self-made women from back in the early 20th century to sort of modern day, and reveals how they created some lasting brands, most of which we all be familiar with. So I'm really keen to dig into that a little bit more today, and more so from the point of view of what are the lessons for any business there in terms of branding and how that brand reflects their business and their values. But before we start talking about all of those things, what's the impact you're making in the world today, Kim?
Wow, what's the impact I'm making? My impact that I'm hoping I'm making is brands are really important to our culture, and they are going to survive beyond you and I, and they have already. They go back over 200 years and beyond. You think of the traditional brand, but brands have gone down for thousands of years. And really all I'm trying to do is communicate the value of brands and the importance of branding. And well, that may not be saving lives. I'm hoping I'm giving that understanding of where they fit in our culture and why they are important.
Yeah, well, one of the, I guess to me, you mentioned that brands have been around maybe for thousands of years. One of the things that we are all familiar with are symbols that have been around for thousands of years. And there's some symbols, and the symbols that evoke some sort of feeling in us because we associate it with something.
Yeah.
I mean, the religious symbols, for example, we associate the cross has been around for 2,000 years. We associate that cross with Christianity, with Christ. It's a religious symbol, right? It's got meaning for people. So it's got more meaning for people that believe in that religion, less meaning perhaps for others. But then there's a whole range of symbols, I mean, dating back even 5,000-6,000 years. Give us your understanding of what exactly is a brand. I mean, is that does that encapsulate what a brand is, or is it more than that, or is that way off the mark?
No. I mean, it is a construct of some sort that we have within our minds, because we have to put something to remind us what the brand is. So anything that is either a logo, or a color or a design element can help us put that as a marker into our brains. But to me, what a brand is, it's not so much of what it says or does, but how it makes its customers feel. And I say it that way because we all seem to think that we as brand builders are in control of the brand. And in actual fact, it is the consumer who's in control of the brand. They get all the signals that we're trying to send them, be it visual signals, be it a design, be it a color, a smell, a taste, but they interpret it. And so as we get into this discussion about branding, which to me is a topic I can talk for hours about, but it's really complex, but it's got to be really simple for the consumer to consume it, because we're being inundated every day with multiple messaging and brands. So we got to figure out exactly what is it that's really important to them so that we can actually get into their heads.
Yeah. That's, I think what you're saying there is that it's, the brand really is more the experience that customers have with that. And instead of, as brand builders, instead of focusing on, are my colors right? Is my logo, or can I design this logo to be even more fancy? is perhaps one example of spending a lot of time on something that may not have much impact, whereas the focus should be more on, how do I want to make my customers feel?
Yeah.
And how can I ensure that everything that I do, whether it's how I design my brand, what products I have, what services I have to offer, the pricing, the customer service, the follow-up, all of the things that experience consistently delivers what I want the brand to stand for and represent.
So going back to Branding Queens, and asking about, what did I learn from them? One of the things I did learn from all of them is they were customer obsessed. And what I meant by customer obsessed, they continued to think about their customer. In a lot of cases, they were the customer. So they had a deep understanding of what they were trying to solve for their customer. But they were never happy with just solving it once. They wanted to make something even bigger and better. And they continued to learn. And all of these women came from backgrounds that, they didn't have a degree in marketing. They didn't have a lot of cases, didn't have an education. And so one of the other things that they brought to the table, or they started with, was that they knew nothing. So they were ferocious in their ability to learn. And they continue to learn from everybody, including their customers. And so they always made sure that they had touch points with their customers, always. And there were always, some cases, I'll give you an example of Liz Claiborne. Liz Claiborne, she would go out onto the sales. She did clothing, and she would go onto the actual retail store floor, and she would walk around. People thought she was a salesperson, and she would be talking to her customers and learning and watching. She did a lot of just watching them, how they interacted with the clothes. So Estee Lauder, she would go actually onto the cosmetic floor, and she would be walking around with her perfume and spraying it around and trying to attract attention. But she was also out there talking to her customers. So these are simple things, right? These are, when you're building a brand, you build it one customer at a time. And so how you do that is by those interactions. So I thought, again, I looked at all of the 20 women, and they all had some sort of way of communicating or connecting with their customers, be it through data, as well as actually being physically with their customers as much as possible.
Yeah, you mentioned something there that probably is a key part of that, and that's the humility with that some of those women didn't even have a formal education, but they came to the business knowing that they were missing that formal education, so they had this hunger to learn and this yearning to really understand the customer, and that sort of hunger to learn and learn from the customer made them open to listen and to observe and to recognize possibilities that perhaps were key in the success. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. Empathy was huge. And some of these brands started back in 1810. And today we hear about caring brands. A lot of these brands were caring brands well before it became something that we use today. Their empathy, understanding, trying to actually make the world a better place. Anita Roddick of The Body Shop, she was out there before anybody else, and taking her revenues and putting it into nonprofit organizations to save the world. And she had, looked at her products and was very, what was really, really important for her was, non-testing on animals of any of her products. And she was one in the forefront of putting that into place. So yeah, I saw these really interesting people. They made a lot of money. No question. They made a lot of money. They sold a lot of products. They have a lot of customers. But that important element of giving back to their community and that social awareness, again, was it because they were women? Possibly. And were they possibly because they were the customer as well? It could be a combination of those things.
All right. Well, let's come back to some of the attributes that these women displayed and that were common across the women you studied. I mean, first of all, I'm curious how you picked what was it, 20 or so that you picked?
20, yeah.
Yeah. And how did you pick them and not others? Because I'm sure there are other really successful women. And then what were some of the key attributes that were common across all of them?
So I picked brands that people would recognize. So there had to be retail brands. I mean, there were a lot of B2B brands as well. So I chose to pick brands that would be recognizable by most people. That there was a brand presence or a cult like following. So, it wasn't just a simple brand. It was one that has persisted for over, in some cases over 200 years. That there was sufficient evidence that they were involved with the brand, that they were intimately involved in creating the brand and the culture. So I had to make sure that I had enough evidence and information to say that they were in control of the brand. And the other really interesting thing is a lot of cases, the brand was synonymous with them. I mean, their name. And that was the other piece. Now that was not a criteria that they had to have their name associated with the brand. But it also had to be some type of brand that had longevity. The youngest brand of all of them was 18 years. So I wanted to make sure it crossed more than one generation. So, it wasn't a trend, that it had consistency beyond just one generation as well. And that it went beyond just one country.
Yeah.
So that was the criteria that allowed me to frame who should be in the book. And then as I started looking at some of the traits, they were entrepreneurs. They were bright, smart. As I said, they learned a great deal of things because they had to learn everything. When you start thinking about running a business, and the size of the business that they turned them into, they had to quickly learn and understand. And they also surrounded themselves with really good people. Were they easy to work with? Not sure about that. They were so obsessed with perfection that they would have a group of people that saw their vision and were with them throughout the whole duration or journey. But there was a lot of people that didn't see, and no, those people didn't hang around. Expectations were too high. So yeah, if you could see where they were trying to go and you bought into it, you had really loyal employees. I mentioned that they're perfectionists. There is stories of many of them throwing products out. It wasn't good enough for the customer. A color was off in a packaging. Money was not the question. It was having the perfect product that they were wanting to be proud of. So they great story of Olive Beach, and the story goes is that if there was a customer complaint, and again, Beach is aircraft, so we're not talking a small product here. We're talking fairly expensive product, and these are planes, and generally these are private planes. So these would be people that were rich, possibly even famous. So if you got a customer complaint, it had to go into her, and what she wanted to know was, okay, what was the problem and what was the solution? And there's a great quote from one of the research books I looked at. It was that the employee said it was easier to solve the problem than it was to go into Mrs. Beach's office to explain to her what the problem was, because she wanted to make sure it was fixed. And there's wonderful stories of literally replacing the plane, almost the engine. And there was, the cost was not it was about making sure that the customer was happy.
Yeah. Well, I guess aircraft is probably one thing where I'd be definitely advocating perfectionism. In some of the other brands, maybe 99% is okay, but not in the aircraft. Yeah.
No,
but I think
exactly.
that the idea of perfectionism, and I know you've got other stories there where product was thrown away or because it wasn't deemed good enough. And that comes back again to this idea of really focused on the customer. If I see something wrong with that product, it's not going to be good enough to the customer. And that consistency of making sure the experience is, here's our level that we need to exceed in quality, in the experience we provide to the customer. And if it's not up to that level, then it doesn't see the light of the customer's eyes, right?
Yeah, and there's always that gray area, right? Of will they really matter? Will they really see that? Will they really matter? And that didn't seem to matter. It was important enough for them that they would not be pleased with it, so therefore no one else should be pleased with it. Yeah. So getting back to sort of just the traits, what I had to do when I started this exploration of looking at all the different brands that these women had created, I came up with sort of 5 principles of branding, and I call them the 5 C's of branding. And the purpose I did this was to sort of look to see, did they cover sort of the key elements of what is important to building a brand? And somewhat of an aha moment for me when I came up with the 5 principles, because it was easier for me now to see, and I actually started with thinking, oh, maybe I can measure and see, is one brand got stronger in one area than another, and at the end of the day, they covered all 5, and you have to cover all 5 to be a successful brand. And so I'm happy to share the 5 C's if you want.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to learn a little bit about them at a fairly high level, obviously. But one of the things that I will do then is ask you if you can give us a practical example of each one in action from one of the case studies that you've done, one of the women's businesses.
So the first one, it's the commitment. It's the why. Why does this brand exist? And I think in a lot of cases of these women, that's what they started. They started with the why. Sometimes you just make a product and then you go, okay, now I'm going to sell it. I think there's a reason why people would like this, but the why is much deeper than the product itself. It was, I'm trying to remember who said, it was Elizabeth Arden. And she had the phrase of a jar of hope. And this was a face cream that she made. And she called it the jar of hope. Well, that's much bigger than a face cream or just a cream.
Yeah.
It's about what she's really trying to do in helping her customer. So the why is the starting point for any brand. It's the purpose, it's the vision. Is there a cause that you're trying to solve or to work with? All becomes really important. This is your story, right? This is the brand story. The second one is construct. And this is the one you kind of touched off earlier, and that's the what. This is the construct is all the branding elements. So, it is the logo, it's the name, it's the color, is the tonality, it's how you demonstrate physically the product as well. And that one, I think, becomes really important. But at the beginning, most brands evolve over time. They start with a logo. I think of Apple's, the first Apple logo that came out. It was really ugly. How it morphed over time, because you really don't know. Like when you first start a brand, one, you don't have money. Two, you're just trying to get a name. A lot of cases, most of these cases, I said they were synonymous with their name. A lot of cases, it was their married name, and so they added elements to it. I love the great story of Madam C.J. Walker. She put Madam and C.J. Walker, and Walker was her husband's name, and C.J. was her initials of her husband. So Estee Lauder, same thing. She put the SD with a little grave on top of the E. It looked French. So they did things. That were really smart to position to the brands, and this is all part of the construct. The next one was community. And community, a lot of people say, why community? Shouldn't it just be customer? And I go, no. It's much bigger than the customer. You've got your employees, you've got your advocates, your stakeholders, your influencers, and your community, your physical community that you're in. Becomes also important. And so this one here is about really understanding the who that you're serving, and you are serving your employees as well as you're serving your customers, because your employees become really important link to your customer. And then the next one is content. And content, this is the one I think a lot of people gravitate to, because this is kind of the marketing. This is the how are you going to get the message out, because there's so many different touch points, and it's everything from social media to advertising, promotions. It's everything such as leadership voice, word of mouth, PR. I'm going to touch on that because a lot of these women use public relations, partly because they had no money for advertising. So, getting free ink, is a really good way to get your message out. And if you can get influencers, reporters to talk about your product, it becomes, cheap advertising. So many of these women utilized PR where possible to get their story out, and they cultivated. Margaret Rudkin, who started Pepperidge Farms, built a really strong network of reporters. She would send out, first thing she would do, or she would invite them over to her place. She would bake bread, and because she was famous for her bread, that's what she started with. And she would send out baked goods after she had a meeting with a reporter. She would send out freshly baked product. And again, that memory and that association, hugely important. And then the final one is consistency. And it's probably not as exciting as all the rest. It is the one about governance. It's the one that how are you going to deliver the product the same way every time, meeting or surpassing the customer's expectation. And if it's, a product that's worldwide, how are you going to do that? So it is about the infrastructure. It is about your business model. It is about, your data collection and your trends, and understanding the trends and understanding your customer needs. over time. So this one is a huge one, really, really important, because without this one, the longevity of the brand is not necessarily determined.
Yeah, and I think the consistency one also covers the culture of the organization, in the sense that every touch point that the business has with a stakeholder, a community member, whether that's customer or employees or even suppliers, that there's a consistency across that this is the experience we want these people to have at every touch point.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key part of that consistency as well.
And the other piece to it, for brands that are going to survive the long haul, it's not only just consistency, but also it's that surprise and delight. It's going that extra little bit each time. While we open up a box of cornflakes, maybe every day, I don't know, but you want your expectation it will be the same. But are there other elements that can continue to develop that relationship? And I think a lot of these women in particular understood that, and that's where I brought the caring of the social aspect, and that there was just more to it than just the product itself.
And what's your opinion? Do you think women are better than men at covering this complete package of 5 C's and that empathy part, and that really listening to the customer and caring?
I think so. I mean, we always hear, listening is not necessarily a man's skill, at least in my household. I'm being somewhat ad lib here, but glib. But I do think there is some understanding, particularly when they understood their market, there being other women. I will use Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely was a great example. She was the one that started Spanx, and these are undergarments. And I mean, it's a it's $1 billion business now. And when she first tried to get her prototype made, and she was just trying to get a prototype, she found out that all of the manufacturers of hosiery was in a certain, just in North Carolina, I think it's North Carolina. Yeah. And she went to every one of these places, and she was a photocopier salesperson. So she knew how to sell.
Yeah.
At the time, and she couldn't get anybody to want to make her thought she was crazy. And it wasn't until a week later she gets a call from one of the manufacturers, and he said, "Hi, I've changed my mind." And she goes, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, I told my daughters, and they said this was a great idea." And the great idea was actually making clothes that fit. They had the hosiery market had I think there was like 5 samples or 6 sizes, and they had nothing to do with body. Everybody's a different shape. It was a standard. And when she started getting into this, she realized that this thing had not evolved over time. There was not even a woman that was in charge or involved in this production, and goes, "Well, this is crazy. No wonder these things don't fit properly and are uncomfortable." And she changed that whole industry.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that. And I know I was having a conversation quite some time ago now about a woman who works in branding and advertising, and she told a story of I think it was a pantyhose manufacturer that she was working, and she was describing her approach to the project, and there was all men in this room talking about women's pantyhose.
Yeah. And And Olive Ann Beach, she was surrounded by men as well. When you're building aircrafts, airplanes, same thing.
Yeah, but at least men use aircraft, so it's kind
That's
of
true.
there's a connection there.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been fascinating, Kim. I really do encourage people to read the book. It's a fascinating read, and there's lots of lessons there. Very entertaining as well. So it's not one of these business books where you sort of get bogged down in a lot of theory, although there is the theory there that you glean out of what you've observed and by studying these women. So really enjoyed the conversation, digging somewhat more into that today. I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round. It's the same 5 questions I ask of every guest with some lightning answers required. Hopefully that'll give the listener something to inspire them to take some action today as a result. So you all set?
I'm ready.
Ready. Okay. What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Never be satisfied with the status quo. Always ask the question, can I provide more value?
I love that. Yeah. And focus on the customer, obviously, based on the lessons. All right.
Yeah.
What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Connect unrelated dots. It's mashing up other things that you've never thought of before. And it's looking at things and just, it's kind of like the brick. I don't know, you've ever done the brick. Try to think of many, 5 ways or 10 ways to use a brick.
Oh, okay.
Outside of what you normally use a brick for.
Yeah.
It's
I've done that with a
like that.
paper clip.
So, yeah, exactly. So it's just connecting new dots.
Yeah, I love it. And I think the story of how you started this book, how you got interested in doing this research is an example of that. Maybe you could share that.
Yeah, sure. So so the first woman that I started studying on this and actually got me thinking about this topic was the brand Veuve Clicquot. And Veuve, French, means widow. And I didn't know that. And I found that out and I go, why would you put widow on a bottle of champagne? Why? What's the story? There's got to be a story. So that got me thinking and looking into it and trying to find out why was Veuve on this label. And you'll have to read the book to find out.
Yeah. And that was one of the dots you connected and led to the extensive study that resulted in the book. All right. What's a favorite resource you use most often?
Oh, so the one I'm using right now is Chat GPT.
Yeah. I hope you're not writing
I love it.
Yeah, I hope you're not writing the books though with that.
No, I've just started. It's been a lot of fun. Playing with it and getting ideas, just generating new ideas. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I've been playing with it quite extensively and trying to teach myself smart ways to prompt it so that you get really good information out. Yeah. And there's some quite amazing things you could do. So the thing I started yesterday, and in fact, I need to pick that up again later today. We're planning a trip coming up, and I said, I'd like to go and see all these different things. And I said, we've got to figure out what's the most time effective and, travel effective way to get to all these places. And I thought, I'm just going to type into ChatGPT. So I said, give me an itinerary that gives me 2 days here and 3 days there and 3 days there and minimizes my driving time and gave it a whole lot of instructions like that. And it was quite amazing. Like in the space of a minute, it came up with a suggestion. And then I went back and I said, well, can you change this bit? Can you change that bit? So for something like that saves a lot of time.
It does. It really will change the way we search for things. Absolutely will.
Excellent. All right. What's the best way to keep a client on track?
So I anticipate issues and potential barriers. I've always asked, what if, and have a plan B at least, but always anticipate there could be a barrier or an issue.
Yeah. That's, I think the power of what if is can't be underestimated. It's such a powerful question. Yeah.
Well, especially if you're in a room of a whole bunch of people and the CEO goes, but what if this happens? And there's a silence in the room because nobody has the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we get to okay, how many different ways can you use a brick?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Define your style. And style is a big word. It can mean, how do you present yourself? It could be some of the physical attributes that you have. It could be your interest. It can be just your personality. Understand what your style is, and then make sure it's consistent all the time.
Yeah, I think that self-awareness is something that I kind of refer back to a lot, and I think we should all learn to become a lot more self-aware. And I haven't found anything yet where somebody actually teaches how do you become more self-aware. How do you listen to yourself, whether it's listening to your body, listening to the conversations going on in your head that are not necessarily front of mind, they're unconscious conversations. How do you observe? I mean, one way a lot of people suggest is talk to other people. So, how do you see me? Which gives you an external view, but that self-awareness thing, I think, is something that we really need to work on.
Yeah, meditation, I think, helps. It'll quieten the chatter down in your brain a little. I meditate every day, and I've been doing this now for the last couple of years, and I found it very helpful to just sort of, take some of that chatter away. And you're able to see yourself as well as others in real time.
Yeah, wonderful. I think anything that you can do to quieten that chatter and so taking time for yourself and reflection, is good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round, Kim. Now, where can people find out more about you, get a hold of the book, find out about the work you do, and maybe even get in touch and say thanks for what you shared today?
So I can be found on LinkedIn under Rozdeba. It's actually under Derek Rozdeba. Kim is my first name, and it's on my book. In my business world, I'm known as Derek, but it's under Rozdeba. There's not a lot of Rozdebas out there. So LinkedIn is one. I also have a website, which is Rozdeba, www.rozdeba, rozdeba.com. And I do my blog there, and all my book is there as well. And then to get the book, Amazon, most of the bookstores, can get it. You probably have to order it in, but also online you can get it. There's a hardcover, there's a soft cover, and there's an ebook, and there's even an audiobook. The audiobook right now you can get through Google or through Kobo as well. Unfortunately, it's not on the big platforms yet. I'm waiting for it to be allowed because it's got AI audio. So a lot of these big platforms don't accept AI voices.
All right. I'll have to ask you about that after the show.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for this, Kim. Now, what action would you like our listener to take out of our conversation today?
Well, I'm hoping that if you're building a brand, you'll utilize the 5 C's. at least use the framework. For me, it's something that allows you to start looking at the pieces more objectively of what you're trying to do from a brand perspective. I find so many people muddle it all together, and it's hard to understand where you have control and where you don't have control, and what's important and what isn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, great call to action. Check those 5 C's, use them as a framework, and see how your brand stacks up, or particularly if you're building it when you still have a lot of influence over how to shape it, check that as a framework. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us today, Kim. It's been fascinating to dig more into some of the aspects of the branding queens and hear what you took out of the study and writing the book and researching the book. It was a valuable addition to what I took out of reading it. And thanks for the book, by the way, also. Now, yeah, please do stay in touch. And I know there's probably another book in the works coming sometime in the future, very near future. So we'll stay tuned and keep an eye out for that one as well.
Oh, great. I'd love to come back and talk about it.
We'll circle back on that one.
All right. Thank you very much, Jürgen. It was great.